Hello everyone, welcome to another Voice Essentials Hangout. My ears have gone all funny for some reason. That's what happens when we go live. It is so good to hang out with you. Welcome to those of you who are already in the live chat. Which way is it? That way. It's good to have you join me. In fact, I've got to be honest, I was a little bit nervous that none of you would remember that we're going live today, because this is the first time we've been live for the last 4 weeks. I've been on a week and a half's holiday. We got back on Saturday, and we had such a good time. I'll show you some photos when I've sort of edited them all up and everything. I'll show you some photos in a few weeks from the time we spent some time just north of Sydney, about an hour's north of Sydney, in a place called Gosford, actually a little part of Gosford called Pearl Beach. Absolutely pristine, gorgeous place, and so I look forward to showing you some of those shots. If you, of course, are watching this video in replay, which most of you do, you are also welcome. It's so good to have you joining me for what I know is going to be a lot of fun. Today I have a guest who's from the UK but is currently in the US. His name is Chris Johnson. I'll introduce you to him in a moment. We've been chatting prior to going live today, and he's just such a great guy, and I know you're really going to enjoy meeting him. Not only is he a great guy, but ladies and gentlemen, this dude knows his stuff, and we are all going to learn something from our time together with him in just a moment. Now, just before we do get going with Chris, the main part of our event, where we learn about singing naked, more about that in a moment, just to let you know, now, as many of you know, I am currently in production for the second exercise CD, which is the second Voice Essentials CD. Now, many of you already own exercise CD 1. Well, we're currently mid-production of a CD2, and it is coming together really nicely. It's more of an intermediate level exercise CD for contemporary singers, and I know if you've enjoyed CD1, you are going to love CD2. Well, we're in mid-production for that, and there is a lady that I used to do a duo with. She's one of the Queensland's #1 premier session singers. It's a privilege to call her my friend, Renee, who is the female you hear singing on CD1. I'm getting her in to do CD2, but her schedule is so chock-a-block that the only time I could get her into the studio with my producer was next Monday. So that means, ladies and gents, that we will not have another live event next Monday. There was no way around it. So we've come back from 4 weeks break. Well, we're going to have another week's break after this week. So I'll see you in 2 weeks when we will be having another guest, Ken Bozeman. Now, Ken's just done, I think, one of the keynotes. I think he's one of the keynote speakers at the most recent National Association of Teachers for Singers conference in Las Vegas, from memory. This gentleman is at the absolute pinnacle of acoustic registers. You have got to tune in 2 weeks. Ken is just outstanding, and you seriously, you cannot miss next fortnight's event. More about that when I see you in 2 weeks, and hopefully you can join me then. But you haven't tuned in for 2 weeks. You've tuned in now to hear Chris, and as I said, Chris is such a nice guy, but many of you will be familiar with Chris's work on a thing called the Naked Vocalist. We are going, what is that all about? Even in the pre-conversation, I didn't ask him the question, what is this whole Naked Vocalist thing about? And so, because I want to hear it from him with you, and so we're going to do that in just a moment. I hope you'll stick around, because this is going to be a really fun chat. We're going to be talking more than just singing naked. But I don't think there'll be any nudity whatsoever in this event. We'll talk soon.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for joining us. So
How's it going?
we've got you. So let's just explain to everyone, because you're a UK voice coach, but you're currently in the US. What's that all about?
Well, I mean, I'm quite lucky to get invited over here actually to work in the summer, and I've been here like 4 times for the summer camp, and there was a winter retreat which was very much to do with songwriting. That was 3 times over. But I just get brought over to work with singers who are on an intensive 10 days of developing all kinds of skills that put them in stead for a music career. Not just young performers. Some of them are in the kids kind of arena, but there's loads of adults who come here to glean from the coaches. So I end up working with one-to-one with a roster of singers, getting them ready for several performances throughout the week. But then with Steve, who's my co-host on the Naked Vocalist, we also take a class every day, for 7 of the days straight, where we introduce concepts of voice science, but for the purposes of educating singers so they can actually generate workouts, they can troubleshoot, they can compile a warm-up. And so we get a class of maybe the last few days, 30 people in the class, learning about all this stuff. So it's great. It's a great thing for me to do. I fly over here, and it's so valuable, and it's a good time with my co-host as well, kind of working together, delivering these classes.
So let's talk about Steve and so here's the question. The question on everyone's mind is the Naked Vocalist. And I'm just showing the website right now. I mean, it is such a catchy title, but what is that about?
Yeah, well, a friend of mine, Dave Stroud, who's a businessman / vocal coach, he's got feet in both of those camps. When we came over here, he was like, you've been working with kids. Not sure about the name, but we were too deep at that point. But the point was that we really wanted to create a channel whereby singing was not fluffy, it wasn't intangible, it wasn't hard to understand, and first and foremost that it was as honest as possible, which is why we're getting many views on the website. So in kind of the naked truth sort of fashion, we decided to go with the name of the Naked Vocalist. But as you've alluded to, how many times do we get introduced to come on stage and they go, and they're fully clothed, don't expect any nipples or something. So certainly that name goes before us, but it hopefully transcends as meaning truth.
We certainly hope it does.
And as we're audio a lot of the time, so in honesty, you don't know if it's just 2 guys sat with each other naked. It could be.
It could be. Now, I've just brought up the podcast page on the website, and everyone, seriously, you've got to subscribe to this podcast because, and in fact, I've been asked to do a podcast as well as all the YouTube stuff. People, I cannot do it all. But these guys have got the podcast thing licked. You've got to go and subscribe to the Naked Vocalist podcast, using whatever you use for your podcasts. And I actually listened to the Catherine Sutherland one, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I listened from beginning to end. And it was good to actually hear Catherine just talk about CVT, and how it came about and all of that sort of stuff. And so there is so much good stuff, and many of you will see names on there that we've had on the channel here. In fact, I think Mary Beth Dame was on here just recently. Well, she'll be on here in a month's time, so that's great. These guys, everyone, Chris and Steve, are interviewing some of the world's leading pedagogues. And seriously, if you're looking for a podcast, look no further. This is the place to go. So you and Steve, now let me just jump back over here because this is not really about Steve, is it? I mean, for once in your life, you get to just be by yourself, Chris. because here you are in all your glory. So let's talk very quickly about, you know, how you came to do this voice coach and mentor thing, and how long you've been teaching and what have you.
Well, teaching, as always, came about for a lot of people. It's not always, I guess, but you know, it's very common that the professional singing route leads to coaching in some way.
Yeah.
And in my case, actually, I was always a singer, but I kind of from the culture of the town that I lived in as a young adult and as a kid, it was very much like a go to work sort of place. So that's what I did. I didn't really pursue music. I just enjoyed it as a hobby, and it was a big passion of mine as a listener.
Yeah.
So my life began like that, really. But then, sort of knocking around about 2007. I was singing semi-professionally for ages by that point, but in 2007, the credit crunch arrived, so, you know, politics ended my career, which was in finance. So I kind of lost my job within 24 hours of hearing the word credit crunch on the news. I was like, oh, that's interesting, this thing. I don't even know what it is, and then I get a box for my things the next morning at work. So it was a very short, sharp career change for me.
Wow.
But in the way that life does this to you sometimes, it was the foot up my backside that I desperately needed to actually say, your lifelong passion, everything you ever really cared about, and I didn't care about finance. That was obvious from how many sick days I took, right? I didn't care about finance. And so life booted me into this whole professional singing malarkey, of which at points, vocal coaching became part of that, because professionally singing, inevitably being so quickly thrust into that industry, my voice started to get really tired. And I couldn't really manage 3 in a row of gigs. So I started to go to London to a vocal coach there who really helped me. And in the end, that was the stimulus for her to say, hey, you know, you seem like you really enjoy it. You kind of understand it. So why not start to study it a little deeper? And that's when, you know, I used that last bit of money that I had just to kind of buy like a piano, a laptop, and a bunch of, or a membership to like seminars and stuff, so I could start training. And it kind of began from there, and goodness me, was that like the best move of my life, to be honest with you. It's obviously getting married. Sorry, Natalie, you are number one.
And number 2 is about to happen soon too, isn't it? Number
2's on the way.
Yeah.
Good grief, yeah, I can't. This is going to be it's a mad year.
Let's clarify what number 2 is, because here we are talking number 1s and number 2s. Let's clarify.
I'm just going to pop to the loo.
Yeah, off you go. No, so you're expecting your first bub?
That's correct. Yeah, in about we're knocking around about 8 weeks.
Wow, that's very exciting. The first child is always a very exciting thing. So, good for you, mate. Now, so we've got the over here in Australia we refer to it as the credit crisis, or the global, what was it called, the global global crash, or whatever it was, the GEC, global economic crash.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
So we've got that to thank for you being here, really, in many respects.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs put me here.
Thank you to all the greedy who knows who's of the world.
Totally.
Something good came of it. So how did you and Steve meet, and how did you start doing the Naked Vocalist thing?
Well, we met at school, so we did the whole nodding thing at the age of 11, right? Which was kind of cool. But we did obviously come into contact a little bit more through school with sports trips. You know, I was just good enough to be the 12th man in the cricket team. So that was good for me, because I'm just chilling on the hill. Do you know what I mean? This is all good. And that's exactly why I wanted to do it, because it was an excuse to go on a trip. So I was down. So we met a bit more on that, and we did get to know each other. But then after school we parted, but we ended up back in contact with each other at the age of about 17 in a choir.
Yeah, right.
Then from then we ended up like reigniting the friendship. We started a few groups together, and then we went on to the professional voice, and then actually the podcast began from trooping up and down the motorway on 5-hour trips to gigs. We used to listen to a podcast about fitness because we were so into it, and this guy called Ben Coomber, if anybody knows of his fitness podcast, we were just listening to it, and it was fun, and it was lax, and it was casual, but it was informative. And then we sat there, and I can't remember which one of us said, like, we can do this. This would be really good for singing. So we got our first pilot together, and it was absolute trash. I mean, we road tested it, and everyone said, yeah, you talk too much. Yeah, there's not enough stuff in it. So we recorded it a further 2 times, and even though the general feedback was, yeah, you talk too much, we just kind of went with it on the first one. So those first 20 episodes are us even just trying to figure out what we're even doing. I don't even think we know now, but I think it's kind of arrived at a format that's kind of working and is listenable, and it does get downloaded a lot now. So it's very, I'm thankful.
I was going to say, if it only took you 20 to get yourselves together, you've done very well. Because I'm up to video 300 and nearly, I think 390, and I'm still figuring it out. So you've done very well if it only took you 20 to get it together. And as I said, I mean, I've been following you guys for a little while now, and this I love the rapport between. We were talking before the show. I love the rapport between both of you, and I love the fact that, and this is something that Mark Baxter and I was saying on this show a few weeks back, and that is this whole singing teaching thing. People are taking themselves way too seriously. It is only singing. We're not brain surgeons. Yes, we do entertain people, and that's an important part of society, and we as artists, we communicate important messages. But in society, singing has been put on a pedestal, and as a result, singing teachers try to put themselves up on a similar pedestal. I love the fact that you guys aren't doing that. You're really, I love the fact that you're sitting there with a casual beer, just having a chat with a mate, and I love the way that you guys own and ground your material. You don't deliver it, and this is so good. You don't deliver it from a guru point of view. You deliver it from the point of view of 2 guys on a journey of exploration, obviously very knowledgeable. We can't remove that aspect of it, but equally you own and ground. And in fact, that's, I think, a good segue into what I wanted to talk with you, a bit about today, and that is because last week or the week before, you guys put something up on Instagram, just a quick, minute and a half, 2-minute video about the fact that this singing thing is not a one-size-fits-all. It really does need to be tailored to every individual. I don't know if you would have recorded that Instagram video probably months ago, but can you recall what you said in that, and can you maybe expand upon that a little bit more for us today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the video isn't so clear in my memory because we wrapped it off right, but we absolutely peddle this message, if you like, the whole time, because there is a thought of this is a process that needs to be done. For instance, like every singing lesson I was pretty much taught began with a lip trill and then moved on to an oo or an e.
Thank you, Seth Riggs.
Yes, which is, don't get me wrong, right? So the kind of the message we're peddling at the moment is, if you don't train at all, and you sing a bit, and we get so many messages saying, I hate my voice, I can't hit this note, and I run out of steam real quickly. And then I ask, well, what do you do? And the answer is, well, I don't do anything at the moment. I don't warm up at all. I say to those people, honestly, if you took an internet warm up, anything that got you from the bottom to the top and back down again, with the mouth closed a bit, or you definitely improve from that.
Yeah,
that's so arbitrary. You absolutely wake up muscles you've never used before that are relevant to the task of singing. But the problem with one size fits all like that is many people take that on very much too long. And let's face it, that's probably only relevant to someone for 2 or 3 weeks, if at that. And then it starts to do its job, and then actually other problems arise that it doesn't solve, and actually other problems are present that it might exacerbate. So in which case, part of our message in where I am at the moment and what we're doing in future is, if you analyze your voice somewhat and some of the parameters within it, then you can start to take these internet advices, if you like, and then you put them through the mill of, is this definitely going to work for me? How can I test that? In which case I'll do a great experiment by singing something, do the exercise, sing it again. Where am I? And one of the parameters we've used, which is really handy, is the longest possible note you can sing. And it's, for guys, we've been doing it around about D3 or E3. And for females, we've been doing it somewhere maybe around A3, B3 or C4. And all they do is like a vocal function exercise. If anybody's familiar with that work by Joe Stemple, it's just straight, clear, a little bit whiny, non-breathy, but not loud. And you need your maximum breath to sing it for as long as you can. So you have to take a big one. And then you take a reading, and that might be 20 seconds, it might be 30 seconds. Some people get up to a minute. It's like incredible. And then you would do, for instance, a breathing exercise, which obviously is going to affect your breathing system, and it could affect how long you sing a note for. And there's a lot of exercises for breathing that are completely worthless. And there's some that are absolutely incredible. So what we did was perform a breathing exercise that was very much to stretch and mobilize the rib cage, so it became bigger, so it became looser and flexible. And then the class sang their longest note again. In which case, some people went from singing a 30-second note to a 50-second note. So it's an incredible change. And it would be like, definitely keep that exercise. That one is working for you, right? Because that means you're incredibly efficient now and you've got a lot in the tank. You won't need to work hard to sing. This person over here, though, I lost 3 seconds. We did it again. It's like, I lost 5 seconds. And I'm like, do you know what? Don't do it. Don't do that one. But when you're delivering one exercise to a group of 30 people, you so see it in group situations. It's not going to work for everyone. But the big point was, if you don't have a measurable in place before you do try something, you could spend a long time wasting time, gaining no progress, or in fact losing progress. And I think that's crucial. If singers are just to have a little bit more guidance on how to measure themselves, then I think we can all take arbitrary information from the internet and actually make it work for us well, because actually there's a lot of good stuff out there. It's just in the wrong format.
And I completely agree, of course, and I think one of the challenges, though, facing, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. Oh, by the way, everyone, I forgot to say at the beginning of the video, don't forget, if you're live with the chat, don't forget to write your questions in the live chat so that we can, Chris and I, mostly Chris, are going to answer your questions towards the end. So make sure we've already got one question from Jet Quinn, but make sure you leave your questions in the live chat because Linda is collating them as we go. So let me just come back to what you've said there, because it's that I think one of the challenges that My wife once said to me, in fact, before I was doing a summer school, when I first was invited to do a summer school, and it was a 10-day event, and I was going to be doing it all by myself, this 10 days, basically this intensive. And I was concerned, am I going to run out of material? You know, am I going to, you know, I was really concerned. And my wife said, being the encouraging person that she is, she says to me, Daniel, you forget how much you know. And I think one of the, and sure enough, when I went, I actually had too much information and I couldn't obviously give it all in 10 days, and so the story goes. But the point I'm making is, I think one of the challenges facing many beginner singers is really they can't have the knowledge base needed to sift through the stuff online and to create those filters. And this is why I keep directing people back to individualized singing lessons with people like yourself, myself, Karen, who from Singwise is in the chat. People who are qualified to create, to help establish that filter so that people start to know, oh, okay, that stuff is going to be good and that stuff is not so much going to be good. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
Oh, well, for the beginner singer, I think it's a different mindset as well. I consider the individual is in that sense, and we like I said before, we get beginner singers contacting us all the time, and the thread of the message, the sentiment of it, is incredibly judgmental. Is one thing. So the issue with beginner singers taking on any kind of this information is the first port of call actually when delivering any kind of warm up or reading it is to take the judgment out of it. I think to begin with, we've been talking a lot about this across this camp, because when you try stuff, for instance, if a beginner has crazy tongue tension and they do an exercise where their tongue is out and the sound gets really worse, as they probably call it, or really bad, right? I've tried this exercise, my voice goes really bad. And the thing about the tongue is, for instance, if we kind of zero in on that, like the tongue can be such an unnecessary supporter to the larynx. It's usually trying to get involved with the voicing process. So when you remove it in an exercise and you get a bad result by putting the tongue out of the mouth, the thing is about that is that the tongue isn't that relevant to how the vocal folds work. Not really. I mean, it's relevant to resonance a bit, but having the tongue out of the way is not going to stop the vocal folds from working. So if you get a little bit of a wobble, it just means that the analogy would be, you know, you've been on a crutch for a while, you're actually better, but you haven't stopped using the crutch, and I've just taken it off you. You're going to wobble when you walk, but give yourself 5 minutes, you'll find your feet and you'll be back to normal, right? And so beginners have a really hard time with that process. We have to be the people that kick away the crutch and say, right, now walk on your own to the vocal folds themselves. And so, I think the pitfall for beginners is really to get over the judgment of sounding at what they would call bad. And failing to see or be guided in an individual sense is why the lessons are important. Being guided in analogies like that to say, this, what seems bad, is incredibly positive. You losing your time on your longest note from doing that breathing exercise is incredibly positive. Science, as is said, it doesn't prove, it only disproves. So any information we gain will tell us what we don't waste time on, what we shouldn't do, and that is easily as valuable as knowing what we should.
What I love finding on places like YouTube is examples, and in fact I found one the other day of Freya Casey, and she's been on the channel here before with me, and we've done a couple of collaborations. She's got a fabulous channel. What I love about one of Freya's most recent videos is she actually recorded herself practicing. Now this is a woman who's been a professional singer for, you know, years, is quite a successful singing teacher in Germany, and she just showed her warts and all, and I loved the honesty, the openness of, and she was hitting bum notes left, right, and center, and she was working through them and exploring, and I think that's the challenge is that in our modern society is that everything is only ever presented once it's perfect, and once it's been polished, and it's tuned and produced, and I think in many respects that's often the telltale. Let me rephrase that it can be a telltale of maybe some disingenuousness behind people when only perfection is presented. I love, I've said it, I've actually shared this story before, and that is one of my favorite albums is of a person that no one internationally would know. His name is Jeff Bullock. He's a songwriter, he's a piano player, he's not much of a singer. But what I love about this album is it is just him sitting at the piano singing his own songs, which mostly are sung by other people. It's raw, it's imperfect, but it's real, it's natural, and I love it, and I think I think people are more and more gravitating back to that level of authenticity. I think that's seen in things like the success of YouTube and Instagram, and the success of the Naked Vocalist, for example. It's just a couple of friends sitting around having a beer and having a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's a lot of industry chat, let's say, across the teaching world, and certainly I would go to events where it's music business based, and then you're getting this kind of sentiment that's creeping through in the industry, which is very much like, hey, listen, great singers with perfect pitch are 10 a penny. They honestly are. If you don't feel like they are, when you go to camps like this, you realize, wow, there's so many amazing singers out here. But that doesn't really cut it, in all honesty. If we obsess about the voice, what someone's looking for is someone that has, let's say, a background, a story, which contributes to the authenticity of that person, because who you are and what you've done and where you've been will tie into the music that you sing, the lyrics that you write, the style that you gravitate towards. And if those jar, then obviously people just aren't going to buy into you. People are quite clever, even subliminally. They just kind of listen to it and go, I don't know why I don't like it. I just don't like it. But that's when you just can't connect to it for maybe a reason that relates to a lack of authenticity or contrived delivery of this music. But that's, again, they're not looking for singers that are perfect pitch, but they're looking for something that sounds different, that sounds new, and that includes musically as well. So if as vocal coaches we're not cultivating an element of creativity, and by the way, if you're striving for perfection, then training creativity will be hell on earth until you accept all of your warts. Because when you're learning to be creative in music, you're going to hit bum note after bum note after bum note. And then you've got to consider how are you going to technically hit those notes when you don't even know what you're going to sing a second before you do it, right? So we've got creativity and skill happening all at the same time. But in the end, what you arrive upon would be something that's unique and different, and this perfect sound and this very similar chord structure that's happening in music these days. I don't think there's ever been a time in modern music where even the industry is saying, can we get something new already? Can we get something new in the top 10? Because good God, it's just electropop, 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 all the same type of voices. I think that's a very deep subject to pick apart. But somebody at some point sways the balance because they're creative, because they're authentic, and they take a risk. Adele was taking risks when she started doing like bluesy ballads, and she never stopped doing it because she spoke deeply to people. She was never anybody but Adele. She never contrived. Lady Gaga was unashamedly theatre in the top 10. Who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought theatre would come in after the 80s, right? But she literally stuffed it in your face and you loved it, right? And then people like Frank Ocean, I mean, when you dig into the music and you play it on the piano, you're like, wow, this is clever. This modulates and it uses sevenths in such a beautiful way. And his melodies against that are inspired. They're absolutely inspired. But and the story of the guy from The Weeknd, he made a load of tosh before he arrived with the right producer, and his songwriting was refined, and suddenly the combination of all of that was like, yeah, as much as you were an acquired taste about a year ago, now you're probably the number 2 grossing artist in the world because you were just willing to take that sound that is unmistakably his, that dark, dissonant R&B into the charts. I thought he's another one that's done quite well. So yeah, sorry, you've set me off on one with the whole art.
I'm smiling like a Cheshire cat because it you are saying, you're just reiterating something that we say here on the channel all the time, and you're saying it so eloquently and with such passion. I love it. You know, it is about finding your own uniqueness and celebrating you, and not being. I think it's our insecurities that lead us to be trying to be something that we're not. And we were talking before the show. We were talking about how big the pie is. YouTube has taught us. Social media has taught us. Not just YouTube, but Facebook and Instagram. The world is not short of talented people. The world is jam-packed, full of talented people. The world is not looking for the next talented person. The world is looking for the next creative communicator, I think. And the ability to communicate a message that is dear to the artist, that the artist feels true to, and that is going to be different for everyone. But when you find that story within yourself, that passion, that authenticity, and you run with it, you can sing bum notes left, right, and center. There will be an audience for you. People will stand up and listen to that authentic message because, hey, you know, to coin a well-coined 2016, 2017 phrase, the world is full of fake news. The world is listening and waiting for true news, and that true news, artists, we're the people to deliver it. We're the people to hold up the mirror and say, can we talk about this, please? You know, and that's going to be different for everyone. In fact, I was having a conversation with my daughter on the way home. The holiday we did was a travel holiday, and we're talking. She's in grade 12, so she's 17, and we're talking about aid scenarios. The fact that there are so many different aid situations that require attention. You know, climate change, refugees. You know, AIDS, the AIDS crisis. There's so many. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. And we're talking about the fact that, you know, in fact, we're talking about, is it Malawa? The young lady that got, Malawa, how do you say her name?
Oh, I don't know. You're doing a better job.
Okay, let's run with that. She got shot in the face by the Taliban, and we're talking about the fact that one of her strengths is she has gotten on to one message. And some people go, oh, she's into feminism for Muslims. No, she's not actually. She's into one thing, and that is education for girls.
Yeah.
That's her thing. She's not into world peace. She's not into, you know, vigilante, you know, for Muslims. One thing, education for girls. You know, and so if a person who can stand in front of the UN zones in on one message, how much more important for us as artists who don't stand in front of the UN, who don't have a world platform necessarily outside of social media, how much more important is it for us to zone in on our message? What is it that we're passionate about? And when we find that, I think that's powerful.
Yeah, and if you consider you could dilute your message for a mass market, not only are you entering into a higher level of competition, which will make life difficult in general, which is tough. The music business is tough in the mass market, but when you look at the very common education of the 1,000 fan rule, and if every one of those fans spends £100 per year, then you've got £100,000 worth of income. It's like, if money motivates you, wonderful, right? Okay, because we do need to pay the bills. I'm not going to shoot anyone down for that, right? But 100 grand is a lot of money, right? You could have a nice life, and you could probably have a pension as a flipping musician, right? Which seems to be unheard of at the moment. Because we need to retire. We need a good life when we're too old to sing, right? So there's that aspect. But I think somebody who's willing to spend £100 on you per year probably is quite into you. And if they're in a room watching you, they're probably going to be like giving you some serious energy. Yeah. And if you did gigs where you had, 200-300 people there just for you, and you're touring around, and this is all related to that fan rule, you're going to have amazing gigs. Yeah, they're not going to be the O2 Arena, but they're going to be great gigs. You're going to be delivering your authentic, non-diluted message, and you're still going to be getting paid $100,000 a year to just do you. I don't know why someone would be so desperate to chase something bigger, sacrificing their authenticity and changing their style, when the pickings are lovely. And in business, if anybody's in business, the main thing people say is, if you want a great time, niche down. And that's what people need to do. Don't be afraid to niche down, because Spotify and the internet allows us to find our audiences in so many countries that I think finding 1,000 fans is an absolute cinch now. It's a cinch. Because everyone's connected, provided your niche isn't too wacky. It can't be too wacky. It has to be music. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, this one message scenario doesn't necessarily limit you when it comes, if you're just a bit savvy with business.
And you're absolutely right, because all the business books I ever read are all saying niche. They all say it. Find a niche. And when you are niching to 7 billion people on the planet, your niche, your very thin slither of niche, is still going to be going out to millions.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is so important. It's funny. I was just thinking how, we're really we have happened across talking about being that naked vocalist, aren't we? Really. We're stripping it all back and going, find your passion, find what it is that you are passionate about, that is underneath all of the facade. And because I say often, good artistry is about standing in front of an audience and going, look at this. It's about creating vulnerability. And the wonderful thing about an artist that is able to create vulnerability on stage is audiences respond with "me too."
Yeah.
And that's so powerful. I dare say it, there are many other times in history where this has been needed, but it's certainly needed now. So my encouragement to every singer watching this, as I'm sure you've heard, Chris passionately talking about, is be naked on stage. Figuratively speaking,
yes.
Be that person that is vulnerable. Be that person that is passionately, committed to your drive and your message, and it will cut through. It will cut through. Not with everyone, And in fact, there will be people that will boo-hoo you. You've got to just sit those to the side and remain committed to the cause.
Absolutely, you know, and I mean, we get that as vocal coaches anyway. You know, we have views and opinions and beliefs and stuff, and we put them out there, and people would go, "Nah, you're talking rubbish," and it might be someone you really respected before, so you just got slagged off by one of your idols, or some people take it in, and again, like it doesn't really matter what industry. If you're wishing to be at the front of it, you take the brunt of some people loving you and some people not loving you. And that's, yeah, if we can, we all have to get used to that as people selling ourselves.
I think the one caution that I would throw in for everyone who, you know, is considering, you know, stepping onto social media to present themselves, to put themselves out there, is once upon a time. In fact, my wife and I were talking about this last week. It might have been the week before, and we were talking about the fact that once upon a time, if you were, say, I'm here in Brisbane, little Brisbane, Australia. We're not the biggest city in Australia. We're not even the biggest state. It's little Brisbane, you know, because I often see these singing teachers that are in, you know, New York and LA, and Chris Johnson's in, you know, London. You know, it's all very. I'm here in little Brisbane, Queensland, But the moment you step onto YouTube and you start to garner a bit of interest and some subscribers, etc., suddenly you are on an international stage. Now, once upon a time, little Daniel in his little studio, I would have been quite safe in many respects, because my stuff wouldn't have been in front of anyone. It would have just been, you know, and people would have loved me, and you know, and some people wouldn't have loved me, and I would have been quite happy. But the moment you put stuff on stage, this is what happens when you put stuff on YouTube or Facebook, is you are exposing yourself no longer to your local community, no longer even to your state or your nation, but you're suddenly on an international, you're being compared on an international level. And it's something you do need to brace yourself for and be prepared for, and to have people who are ready and able to support you as you build the artistic and creative muscle to withstand what will happen. You will get the knockers, like you're just saying. And I have been in that situation where one of my idols, you know, has shot a salvo across my deck and gone, "Ah!" You know, you lose sleep, but it is well worth it, because when you stand on an international stage, for those of you who are willing to do it, it can only make you stronger and refine your craft, whether it be your singing or singing teaching, and it can really benefit you. But do it when you are in a place ready to do it. I think that would be a good sort of caveat for us to build in there.
Yeah, and you know what? Funny enough, the way singers grow up is important in that one, right? Because a false sense of competency can be generated in some people, which leads them into situations which can be shocking for them when they don't get the feedback that they had.
Absolutely.
That's when, like, you know, parents who are just a little bit too much like, "You're amazing," you know, there is a false sense of competency that comes in. We don't want people shooting them down either, but you know, the sort of the influences from an industry that they want to be in, like a vocal coach, does keep singers grounded and avoids that sense of false competency, so they do breach that stage when they have some security in their voice and who they are themselves. But even saying that, you know, that singers still have this habit of being apologetic as they deliver themselves to you, almost before every song, like, "I hope you like it," or "Sorry, I have a cold," or, you know, how many performances begin like that? And it's almost like whatever you have to deliver in this world, it will be received so much more deeply if you don't apologize for it in the beginning. Just please don't do that.
I would go as far as to say you're actually not being truly vulnerable if you're apologizing, because you're actually immediately putting up barricades to criticism. The only way to be truly vulnerable is to put down all your weapons.
Yeah.
And go, here I am, naked, you know.
the thread, nakedness, exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's me. This is all I've got. But, you know, that's humanity. That's the rawness of humanity. We're all naked, you know, figuratively speaking.
Yeah.
I feel like I've really got to you know, make sure that everyone gets we're talking figure. Yeah. Hey, look, I knew I'd enjoy our chat today, and we really are nearly out of time, which is probably fortunate because we've only got 2 or 3 questions that we will go through in a moment. Is there anything you want to just say before we go to the Q&A? Anything that you want to just finish off with?
Not necessarily. I mean, yeah, we spoke a lot about artistry and stuff, but you know, if anybody's sort of still mulling over the whole warm-up scenario and how to get that going on, I just wanted to reiterate the point of having ways to measure your success, and it's quite easy to find those ways. It's quite easy to develop those ways, and be willing to change and be willing to challenge and our own beliefs that have lived on forever, especially limiting beliefs, fixed mindsets.
Absolutely.
Those sorts of things. If anybody's listening and not seen the fixed mindset versus growth mindset model, and you believe that you only have a limited capability, then it doesn't matter what warm-ups you find. You will limit yourself from your own beliefs. And I think the whole world has trouble changing in every way possible because beliefs are too dear. And we just have to let go of them and embrace what we don't even know is possible, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And again, let me encourage everyone, hey, jump across to Naked Vocalist podcast. There's a link in the description section below this video, and subscribe. These guys, you know, Steve and Chris, I just know how much you'll get out of it. It's not in, you know, highfalutin singing teacher talk. It's in accessible, understandable, easy language that is you know, accurate and is current and is research based, but it's not, you know, in tutti frutti, you know, high singing teacher snobbery language. It's really easy to engage with. So everyone, you've really got to get over there and subscribe. Chris, thank you so much. Can you hang around and we'll do a quick Q&A, answer a couple of questions here, and then we'll finish up for this afternoon. We'll come back right after this. Okay, so let's get into some questions. So I've got some questions here now. This question was asked by Jet Quinn. Hopefully Jet is still with us because it was asked right back at the beginning of the show. I was wondering why I can sing in falsetto easily when I am by myself, but when I'm in front of other people, for some reason, it just doesn't want to come out.
Wow, that's a really interesting one. And it you know, I don't have the definitive answer because there is a multifaceted way that this could work. And it kind of ties into diagnosing problems because like tongue tension and low airflow can both generate flat pitches, right? So you hear the word flat pitch and you're like, oh, it could be like 9 things, right? So it's really difficult to tell. And with this falsetto business, the throat responds to our emotions, as does our voice. The neurological links are incredibly close to those things. And a tight throat in an anxious state is not an uncommon thing. In certain ways of singing, if the singing is kind of breathy like falsetto, narrowed throats tend to cause a lot of issue to sounds that are kind of breathy like that. Narrow throats tend to couple better with high levels of closure, more so, or narrowed spaces, let's say. I don't want to say narrowed throats, I want to be more accurate than that. So it could be a question of your throat responding to the anxiety of being in front of people. Also, falsetto is going to have a requirement for airflow, much different to your chest voice. So in which case, falsetto is the larynx and the vocal folds are a little bit more open. They let a little bit more air through than in chest voice, actually quite a lot more. So you're going to have to feed that. People run out of breath easier in falsetto as well, especially if it's lower down where it's a bit more slack. So if the room and the situation is making you only half commit to that note, you'll unknowingly be withholding your airflow because it's your power source, it's the source of volume. And we all know that. If we're going to be loud, we'll go take a big breath because we know it's related to volume, right? So that could be one other reason why the falsetto is not coming out. And they're the two kind of high priority things that I might consider if that was me. There may be some other stuff, but I think those two might get to the crux in most people. And
that they would have been the two things I would have gone to. The challenge of breath is it's the number one thing that's interrupted by performance anxiety. We also know it's the number one thing that then in turn interrupts performance anxiety. So
yeah.
You know, these are. I immediately go to the two things you've just mentioned. Jet, if you're interested, you can jump across onto the channel. I do have a video about falsetto, and it's something I need to do more. I think in my videos is to always create a disclaimer of generalization for everyone. I do my best to do that, but remembering that the information delivered in all of my videos, unless otherwise specifically stated, is general. So play around with the exercise in that falsetto exercise video. If it's helpful, great. If it isn't, my encouragement to you is to find yourself with a singing teacher who can explore that area with you. And but what Chris has just said, you know, I think is quite on point. Let's jump to question 2. This is by Bassett Studios Etsy, who writes, aside from time frames for holding notes, what else can we use to establish a baseline for improvement?
Well, the obvious one is range. Not to create an obsession about range, by the way, because I don't think it's probably unnecessarily obsessed over.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, you know, you have a voice, you have a physiology. Range means we often sing against our physiology, and that burns us out quicker. So we have to understand the physiology. So
yeah.
The low notes are interesting. So we want to go down to the low notes, but as we know, they're very hard to extend. Our low notes for a lot of people are often what they are. The highest note in falsetto, or in your, you know, not necessarily trying to belt, but just the highest note you can make in any kind of light voice, is a barometer not only for levels of flexibility, especially if you know what's related to some voice types, and where some notes are like, no, that's not the top of someone's range, that's a sticky point. And distinguishing those, that's kind of what you do with the vocal coach. But if you go up into your head voice, that is a barometer for fatigue. So if you lose 2 or 3 notes off the top for a day, you'll know that there's some level of vocal fatigue happening, or likely. In which case your vocal activities may be, if you've just taken on a new warm-up exercise and you see that, I just can't get to that normal B flat 5 on the top like I would normally before. Now I'm kind of to G, and then it stays there and it may go down to F sharp. Then it's like, if you hate your head voice, you'll never discover this. And so many people hate their head voice.
Yeah.
So you need to know it, because it is the first warning sign of inflammation and stuff like that. So there's some. The obvious one would be where the break is. That's super obvious. And everyone's focused on that anyway. And the speed of articulation, I think, is important. And I would use an exercise that is like beatboxing. Some people go fast, but peter out very quickly, and then they have to take time off. That means like they're getting fatigued in their articulators quite quickly, so they may be holding some tension. Some people can't begin to do that in a rhythmic fashion in any case, in which case they're quite maybe a bit uncoordinated with their articulators, and uncoordinated articulators tend to be quite rigid or in one spot, in which case that would allow you to sing a narrow set of notes well and a whole bunch of notes not so well, in all honesty, because the system needs to be very flexible and dynamic to respond to vocal quality and pitch. So I think a few articulatory exercises for speed and duration of that can give us a great idea of how those articulators are happy or not with pitch and voicing.
Yeah, and I would add, which actually I don't think I'm adding because I think you did touch on this, building that relativity around knowing your voice. So knowing where your general top note is, where your break is, where your general low note is, where the voice wants to naturally transition. Getting to know your voice intimately, you immediately are able to detect when it's not doing what it generally does when it's in general health. And so that relativity is so important. And that just comes back to that regular vocal activity, whether it be singing exercise, songs, what have you. And
you know what I think is where it can be a little bit off-putting to go and do voice analysis, because then somebody who's not necessarily experienced in something like piano can have a steep learning curve, because it's like, now I need to know my voice and now I need to know what the notes are on a piano, but there are apps that tell you anyway. It's not a big deal, and it really is. It doesn't take long to know what those notes are on a piano, and you just hear it and you note it down, and then you can get one on your phone, ding, ding, ding. It's not a big deal, but oh my God, if it does your head in the beginning, it's so worth it in the long run. Yeah,
great point. And even if you're using an exercise CD like mine, you get to know where the track is. You know, that's where I generally, if at 1 minute 27 seconds, that's where I normally get to. So you know you're having a good day if you get to 1 minute, 37, or equally if you don't get to 59 seconds. So there are certainly ways to build that relativity in the digital age, which are a lot easier than, maybe we had it 20 years ago.
Yeah, and just to add as well, is that why a vocal coach is important is because the improvements in our own vocal tone we often miss because we are so disparaging of ourselves. Until we sound phenomenal, everything underneath that line is crap, right? So an outside ear in terms of aesthetic is really important, because we totally miss those goals as the singers ourselves. So one of those parameters really needs an outside ear.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple more questions. I just want to very quickly answer this one, Yuhui, because it's directed at me. I have your CD but have a hard time hearing the notes to be sung. What can I do to create the notes to do the practices? I cannot play an instrument. That's a really good question, Yuhui. Just to explain, on my exercise CD, I purposefully, you hear me sing through the exercise once, and then I don't continue singing until Renee comes in and does the female line. And we purposefully pulled the notes. They are there, but they're back in the mix, because I don't want you to become reliant on hearing the notes. I want you to be able to establish an independence and some autonomy, so that you are developing. It takes a little bit longer to get into that, Yuhui, but it certainly has longer legs in the long run. I don't know what I'm saying, but you get my point. It's purposefully done that way. I know it's harder at the beginning, but stick with it and continue to work with it. And again, they are there, but so you just have to listen a little bit carefully. Cockney Rebel asks, what does your sweet spot range refer to?
Oh, well, that takes a bit of time to discover, in all honesty, because what we might call our sweet spot would be where we feel most comfortable and where we can deliver the best in our current situation. And in all honesty, if we look at our physiology and as individuals, in the beginning, we definitely won't be singing our sweet spot. We will be singing in the place that's easiest, and that's fine. We can call that sweet spot if you want. That's all good. But when our voices are worked out and they are flexible, what we get to take advantage of is our physiology and how that portrays emotion and how that portrays clarity and whatnot. And this is why tenor and baritone and all those terms have come up over the hundreds of years of vocal work, is because some voices are incredibly resonant in certain parts of the range, and it's to do with the shapes of the throat and mouth, as well as the physiology of the larynx and even the body and the morphology of the face. If that singer can be unleashed from their vocal strains that stop them from finding that, then suddenly you'll get this tenor on an A, and you're like, oh, that's so good. It's like, it speaks through me. You don't even need to say a lyric. It has all the information in the sound for me. That just makes me just throw my hat on the floor and just walk out, right? Because I love it.
Mic drop.
I'll be, yeah. So for me, the vocal sweet spot is like, where you can unlock some of your potential and make your voice flexible so that you can access certain emotional qualities that lie within a particular range. And I think for modern music today, if you're missing some of that sweet spot, you kind of miss a bit of dynamic capability in how you deliver an album. It's fine for one song, but many singers who are a little bit narrow in what they can deliver and don't necessarily access that, they struggle to maybe find a full album to keep people interested. It's a song here and there. So I find, every voice type is different for that.
The classical singers refer to the prima voce and the seconda voce. And this idea that you have a prime voice, which is what we're really referring to when we call sweet spot range, and a secondary voice. It's all one voice, but it's where we feel most comfortable. Now, where that really, and what Chris is saying, where that really comes into its own is where the prima voce, that prime voice, that sweet spot range, matches with the tessitura of the song. And the voice just sits in that space and just rings. That's where a voice can really, it's like Chris just said, can deliver so much information in the tone and in the timbre beyond the lyric. That's where it gets exciting. Cockney, there is a video, one of my older videos actually, called Prime. Go looking for Prime Voice on the YouTube channel, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. We got one more question, mate, and then we're going to let you go, because what time is it there right now?
Oh God, my computer says 6 a.m., but
that's right.
It's 10 past 10, so it's not that late here.
You are a champion. Thank you for sticking around. We got one more question. It actually comes from Linda. Linda, and I do want to just give a shout out to Linda and Karen from Singwise. You guys are great. Thank you for moderating today again. And thank you to Linda for collating the questions. And Linda, you get the last question today, which is I'm quite pleased about. So here's a question from Linda. How important is a stylistically accurate cover? A good original song can stand to have the odd bum note, as nobody has anything to compare it to. So listeners will automatically look to compare any cover to the original song or its best version so far. How important is it when singing a cover, creativity versus accuracy? That's a great question.
Oh, it's an absolute cracker.
That is a cracker.
We should schedule a different hour. Hey, listen. I mean, there's quite a few answers to this. Some would be related to like commercialist views of, look, if you're going to sing that song for money, it probably needs to be,
you've got to be right on.
It's got to be right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've the thing is about Steve and I, when we did our shows, is that we would interpret Motown and soul in different ways, and we would always sing them differently, because that's what we did. We were improvisers. So we would do that, and the criticism that sometimes came in going, oh, you guys just did too much. Like, I just wanted to hear the original. And as much as I was like, that hurt me inside, like, you didn't like my creation, you have to understand why people want a function band, right, in the first place. But on saying that, yeah, so being able to stylistically analyze and deliver accurately in that sense is big time. And if you're a session singer, you're doing that on command, like, the whole time. So I really respect those singers for being chameleons like that. They're amazing. If you're going to sing a Whitney song, like Whitney, but you're going to just do it as a cover, it's almost like it will be compared. There's no doubt about it. It will be compared. And what a lot of people would say who are trying to sell you as an artist, like, this would be a manager's response. Would be, if you're going to sing it in the same kind of arrangement, time signature, and key as Whitney, it needs to be as good as Whitney. If not,
it's got to be. It's actually got to be better.
Yeah, it's got to be better. There's no way you can just walk up and do a lesser job of that. And I don't want to put judgmental phrases on it, but this is what you'd hear. So you have to take that song to the cleaners on style, and you have to change it so it literally isn't that song anymore. It's still attachable from the melody and someone could recognize it. But I hate the song time after time. I literally hate it, right? But the message in it is amazing, and that's why it resonates. And it's been covered a million times. And some of the covers, I love them. I love the covers because of the singer and their interpretation of it. So there are many songs where I would take the cover over the original any day. Chris Cornell does a cover of Nothing Compares to You. Way better than Sinead O'Connor, but obviously not as good as Prince, because that was just the best one. But Sinead O'Connor took that song from being soul and really cool and duet to something completely different, but she has to do stuff like that. So I think it's really relevant, and that's where we get back to creativity. If you're not sure about time signatures, you don't know enough about modes, then doing that job of taking a song and making it your own can be really difficult unless you work with somebody who's going to take that lead and have that direction.
Yeah, I mean, a song that jumps to my mind is K.D. Lang's representation of Hallelujah, which yes. She did a live performance of that here in Australia, and I show young emerging artists that performance because it actually speaks to what we were talking about before. She's gone beyond the singing of the notes and singing of she's gone to the message, and what does the message say to her? But then she nails all the notes. you know, like, and so getting back to the question, which you've just answered brilliantly. There's not really a right answer that fits all, Linda. I think it is contextual. The answer is going to be contextual, and depending on where the performance is being done, who your audience is, what their expectations are. You know, if you're a covers band in a pub, then you know the pub can't afford AC/DC, so they've got you. So. You know, you just have to do the best you can with what you've got. You're going to have to emulate to the best of your ability, but no one's expecting you to be AC/DC if you're a covers rock band. So it really comes back to the context, I think.
Yeah, and you know, it's like if someone's going to go and watch a soul band, even the fact that they like soul, they're probably going to expect some improvisation anyway, because it's part of the genre. If somebody goes and sings loads of pop songs, like even straight up like 80s pop, for instance, and they start doing creative riffs, again, that's going to be so much less appropriate, and so it's even genre specific and
Yeah.
how relevant it is to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it could be multifaceted.
Yeah.
So many.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, we could spend an entire whole other session talking about that. So we have to bring this to a close. You have been so generous with your time, and I have been so appreciative. Let me just wrap this up, and but before before you go, I'll get you to just give everyone a wave and thank you for participating in the live hangout today. It has been so good to have you. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Johnson, the naked vocal, well, one of two naked vocalists. Maybe we'll get Steve on here in the future. That would be a lot of fun also. I hope you've enjoyed the live hangout today. It's a bit of a longer one. We usually only go for about 40, 50 minutes, but that is just the amount of downloadable information that Chris was able to bring to us in our discussion today. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Remember that we don't come back for another couple of weeks when we'll have Ken Bozeman. It's going to be a real treat to have him on the show, and I hope you can join us for that. If this is the first time you've ever joined us for the live YouTube Hangouts, welcome. I hope you've enjoyed the chat. Make sure you subscribe and hit that white bell icon so that you never miss another live Hangout. We do these every Monday. Well, most Mondays, of course, not next Monday. Most Mondays at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And if you can't join us live, then we would love for you to always watch the replays. And we also have live videos that go live every Wednesday and every Friday. And this Wednesday, we're talking about the best place to practice singing. I get asked this question a lot. Where can I practice? I don't, So I've got a few ideas that I'm going to throw your way, and I hope you'll jump in and watch that video on Wednesday. But before we see you on Wednesday, I've got to go because it's been we've had a long chat today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. But as always, as I close off with every video, my name's Dr. Dan. Sing well.